I can see you, but I can't hear you. But you just smile like you can hear me. I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab the water. Hello, Don. Now I can hear you.
How are you, sir?
Good. Let me turn that up just a little bit. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. You have used Zoom before, I assume.
Yes.
I'm sure you guys have been Zooming in your LD or somewhere up there in the rest
Yeah, but not as much as as you might imagine, I guess. I haven't had as many Zoom meetings as I tried to have one with Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and my camera finked out on me, so I could see them, but they couldn't see me. But anyway, but maybe that's a blessing to them that they couldn't see me.
That's part of the technology, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's part of the technology. So can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right.
And vice versa?
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. This is the Sahuarita Tea Party YouTube channel, and our special guest tonight is Mr. Ken Bennett. Ken was the former Secretary of State for Arizona, second in command at the time, and he has also been a Senate leader. He's been in the House. He knows a lot.
I wasn't in the House. I was never in the House.
Okay, well, he was in the Senate, and I know.
I started out in the Senate and stayed there for 8 years. In the last 4 years, I was president of the Senate.
President of the Senate, right?
Yeah.
So we're here tonight, and I asked Ken to come on so we could talk about. Well, unfortunately, I'll use the word pandemic and what's been happening in Arizona since March 17th. And if you excuse me a minute, Ken, if you want to talk a little bit. First, I need to get some housekeeping out of the way.
Okay, go ahead.
I was asked by Patty to let you know that you are invited to this year's roundup.
Oh, good.
On September 26th, and it will happen. You remember the place we met before was the Cow Palace.
Right.
The Cow Palace got flooded out and is closed now.
Oh, really?
Never to reopen. But across the street is the Longhorn.
Okay.
Saloon and Grill.
And what date again? Is it September what?
September 26th. And we're going to start at 5 o'clock and go till 8 o'clock. And she specifically requested that you bring your guitar for entertainment. So
Okay.
we really would love to see you, and bring your wife if you can.
Okay.
And
Well, last time I was there, Jeff DeWitt was with me,
right.
and
Oh, it was a good time.
it was a wonderful evening. Jeff was like a stand-up comedian. I did some of my songs on the guitar, and people seemed to enjoy that. And
Well,
it
they
seemed like there
did.
was a third other person. Who was the other?
Well, I think we had Gary's son was with us and played the guitar too,
Okay.
didn't he? And but we had a lot of people, and it was a
Oh,
lot of
it was a
fun.
great evening. Yeah.
We're going to try to do the same thing this year, and we've invited Andy Biggs.
Okay.
And but we'll invite a lot of other people after the primary.
Okay.
We'll see who kind of washes out.
All right.
And you don't have to worry about that. You're
For the first time in a long time, I'm not running in this year's primary for anything. So
I bet if you,
my wife is quite pleased with me at this
I
moment.
bet she is. Yeah, I bet she is. So let me get my notes, and I'll be right back on screen. I'm using a green screen, so that's why you see.
I can tell because I doubt that you are perched in a tree east of the Capitol building,
Right.
where I can see it in the background. So
But
I
did
figured
that
you were
Yeah, I did that in your honor,
okay.
your old place of work. So see, what floor were you on? The 6th or 7th floor?
No. Well, when I was Secretary of State, I was on the 7th floor. I had the
7th floor,
entire
right.
7th floor.
Yeah, and the governor's
7th
on the-
floor of the square-topped Capitol building you can see behind you.
Right.
But
This one
when
up
I served in the Senate, anybody who's looking at your picture, the Senate is on the left,
Right.
over your right shoulder.
Yes.
And so yep, that's it. That's the
Yeah.
Senate. And then when I was Secretary of State, I was responsible for the old Capitol, which is everybody can see there, that has the copper dome. And there it is. There's the copper dome, and
and the museum. And
winged victory
Right.
standing up there.
Well, talk a little bit about what you did with the bringing the guns of the Arizona to the state. Can you?
Yeah, if
tell
you're
people
green
a little
screen,
bit about that.
well, when I was Secretary of State, an attorney who had worked in the House when I was in the Senate came to me, and he had been doing some late night reading one night and read where the United States Navy had one remaining gun barrel from the battleship Arizona that was sitting in a storage yard in Northern Virginia. And he said he had read in the article that they were about to auction it off for the lowest bidder or highest bidder, or I guess it would be the highest bidder, but it was going to be cut up and melted down. And he didn't think that was the way the last gun barrel from the battleship USS Arizona should go out. And so he asked if I was interested in trying to get the Navy to give Arizona that last gun barrel, and maybe we could put it out in Wesley Bolin Plaza, where we have the masthead and one of the anchors from the Arizona. And I thought that was a great idea. So I called the Navy. That's quite an act in and of itself, is
Another
calling the
story,
Navy.
right?
Yeah. But I finally got a hold of the director of inactive ships. So the Navy has a department of inactive ships. And I told him I was Ken Bennett, Secretary of State from the state of Arizona. I heard there's one last gun barrel. Now this, when I say, they call it a rifle. The Navy calls it a rifle, but it's about 50 feet long, shoots a 14-inch shell,
Right.
and weighs about 50 tons.
A big rifle.
Oh, big rifle. And I said, we were interested in getting the last gun barrel, as I called it, from the USS Arizona. And he says, oh, I'm not sure we would ever part with that, even though they had it on auction coming up in a few months. He says, I'm not sure we'd ever part with that. And it was sitting in an old field, rusting away and this and that. But he says, how about, would you take one of the gun barrels from the USS Missouri? We have 7 of those. And I reminded him that I was the Secretary of State of Arizona.
We don't take Missouri guns.
Yeah, what about Missouri? But then it occurred to me that the Missouri was the battleship that the Japanese had signed the surrender on in
Right.
Tokyo Bay in 45, September 45.
Sure.
And of course, you know, the USS Arizona kind of represents the beginning of World War II for the United States. And so I somehow the idea came into my head, and I said, well, what about if we get both? We get the one remaining gun barrel from the Arizona and one of the 7 that you have from the Missouri, and we'll put them out there and they'll represent the bookends of the war, the beginning and the end. Well, he got all excited about that idea. And so I've always, whenever I tell the story, I say, typical federal government, if you want one something, they can't do that. But if you ask for 2, they can do that. And so, and maybe we're about to get that on these stimulus things that they're talking about doing another one now for COVID.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But anyway, long story short, I also found out, in fact, that Senator McCain had tried to get this last gun barrel off the Arizona 10, 15 years earlier.
Oh, really?
And even he had not succeeded.
Oh, man.
But I must have hit the right guy at the right time.
Talk about a feather in your cap.
Well, yeah. And so we ended up getting the last remaining gun barrel from the battleship Arizona. It was not on the Arizona when the Arizona was sunk in Pearl Harbor. Right. But it had been on the ship. And a few months before the attack on Pearl, it had been sent back to a naval base on the eastern U.S. coast to have the lining relined so that it would shoot straight and all this stuff. And later it was used on the USS Nevada. It was used to soften up the beaches for D-Day. And then it was taken off the Nevada before the Nevada was destroyed in some nuclear testing and things like that. But there it sat, and we were able to get that gun barrel along with one of the gun barrels that was actually on the Missouri when the Japanese came on and surrendered in September of 45.
They shipped it by railroad, right?
And we came out by railroad. BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, they donated the trip across the country as their contribution to giving these 2 barrels. And we had probably about $600,000 or $700,000 of contributions and in-kind contributions from all kinds of companies around Arizona. We did not spend one dime of taxpayer money, but we ended up constructing the 2 gun barrels. We refurbished them, and they are now at Wesley Boland Plaza.
Right.
And in between, our architect came up with the idea of making these 9 steel pillars come out of the ground like the hull of a ship. And on those steel pillars, there's a nameplate. In fact, my nameplate is, they made one for me when I was, so there's a nameplate.
There you go.
And we researched through the Navy and the Air Force, I think it was the Army and the Navy. We researched all Arizona soldiers from any of the military units that were killed during World War II from Arizona. And so on those steel pillars that come out of the ground hangs about 1,700 nameplates of Arizonans who were killed during World War II. And each one of them is memorialized, and the whole thing became Honor the Fallen. And so we now have the 2 gun barrels, the nameplates in between. It's next to the anchor and the masthead, and it's really become a beautiful part. Some say kind of the focal point now of Wesley Boland Plaza, along with many other wonderful memorials that are there. But it's probably by far the biggest single memorial. And we discovered in this process that there was a memorial in Wesley Boland Plaza to every U.S. war or conflict except World War II. And so this kind of became Arizona's memorial to World War II, and we have the gun barrels from Arizona and the USS Missouri.
So what a wonderful accomplishment. And Patty and I still remember the ceremony.
It was
in the park, and it was a beautiful day, and the flyover by the B-17, and we had 3.
We had 3 survivors.
Yeah, right.
From the USS Arizona.
Yeah.
That was in Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. And so I think it was a wonderful day. And we had hundreds of veterans from all of the different wars since World War II. Yep. And we had a big motorcycle ride in from Mesa with Dierks Bentley. Right. And we probably had about 1,200 motorcyclists that drove in, including me. I was right behind Dirks, and we left the Bass Pro Shop parking lot in Mesa. And by the time that Dirks and I pulled into the Capitol, the last bike still hadn't left Mesa. So the line of motorcycles probably had to be 20 miles long.
Isn't that great?
And they eventually all showed up at the Capitol, and we had a wonderful day. It was great.
It was. And just for everybody's information, that park is right there, straight away where I look like I'm standing. If you walked away from my face, you would be in the park.
Yeah, the Wesley Bolin Park is just east of the state capitol.
Right. And people ought to go visit. It's really it's quite a sight, and it's a wonderful memorial. And we thank you.
You bet.
As Secretary of State, that is a feather in your cap, Ken. It's really, it was quite a day, and it was really a neat thing to do. And I think I think a lot of Arizonans probably don't know about it.
I talk to a lot of people, and if somehow the subject comes up about the gun barrels, they say, I've never seen that. And of course, you know, if you live in Arizona and maybe you visited the Capitol 30, 40, 60 years earlier when you were a child, you think, well, why do I need to go back? But we're always adding new things. And this one, I think, is probably one of the most fantastic new memorials there. So
it's very special. Yeah, it sure is. So thank you for that story and telling the folks. Now, I did a little research today on executive orders. And the governor,
as in the governor executive orders?
Been very busy. The first one was written on March 19th, and it was executive order, I think it was 2020. And that's the first of 45.
Wow.
There have been 45 executive orders. And as far as I can tell, most of them, if not all of them, are associated with the pandemic in Arizona.
Okay.
So we kind of started out with, and I put some notes here. The initial response was, you know, it was pretty benign. It said, the Secretary of Health and Human Services had announced the emergency and the pandemic, and the president had, and it mentioned that. And didn't talk about shutting down the economy or any of that stuff, right? It just said, well, we're kind of in this now, and then the second thing that came out was the couple days later is when we shut down the economy, limiting the operations of certain businesses to slow the spread of COVID-19. That was the first kaboom on the economy, right?
Boy.
And then we had delaying elective surgeries to conserve personal protective equipment necessary to test and treat, which kind of the shutdown of our healthcare system for almost everybody, right? And then, and Patty just showed me a note, my volume is too high, so too low. Okay, well, I'll get it turned up here. Let me fix that for the folks. Hold on, Ken. I will get my volume turned up.
I hope mine's okay, because I don't know if I could turn mine up
as
quickly as you are.
I can crank mine up some more. So
now I can't hear you at all.
Okay, and I usually now can you hear me? Are we good?
That's nice.
Okay, so the executive order came out to conserve personal protective equipment, which meant virtually we shut down the health care and dental care for everybody in the state. And there have been a lot of repercussions because of that. And then on March 23rd, prohibiting the closure of essential services, sort of the essential versus the non-essential. That's when a lot of people found out they really weren't essential, and which was a horrible mistake because.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
You know, we all feel like everybody's essential in the country. You know, there's
any job that supports
any job, right, that supports
the family.
Yeah, is essential.
Is essential in my book.
Of course it is. So, and then on April 2nd, another whammy came: the expanding access to pharmacies. Well, that was probably good because we went from getting 90 days where we could get 180-day prescriptions, which seemed like a good idea. We didn't have to run back. But he also added the hydroxychloroquine restrictions to that EO, where it stated in there.
I still don't understand that.
Well, nobody does, because we've had so
Whether
much,
somebody thinks hydroxychloroquine is going to work or is not going to work,
right.
why would we deny Arizonans the option to try it if they want?
Yes, and now it's proven that there is a doctors' conference going on back in Washington, D.C., Ken, that the Tea Party Patriots have put together. And they've actually been censoring their videos on Twitter and Facebook. But,
Isn't that the one that got Donald Trump Jr. Banned
yes,
from
that's the
Twitter
one that
for
got Donald
a few
Trump
hours?
kicked off of Twitter. He retweeted that video. But I mean, these doctors, they're doctors, and they're treating people in different states, and they swear by that hydroxychloroquine is helping people, and they have people coming in that are scared, that are
Yeah.
having trouble breathing, and they prescribed hydroxychloroquine, and along with the other, with zinc and the erythromycin, I think it is, and they're fine. And so I don't know why Governor Ducey won't lift that ban now. I just don't understand it. And then,
I don't understand. I don't understand it either. I'm so disappointed
yeah,
in a Republican governor acting as though people don't have any individual responsibility and can take care of themselves. And we
Right.
need the governor to tell us what we can or can't do all the time.
yeah, and we can't be treated by our primary physician. You know,
Yeah. If
It's
someone has a primary physician that wanted to
yeah,
put somebody on hydroxychloroquine, you can't do that because I guess the governor has agreed with some other part.
yeah,
I don't know if it's the bigger, the smaller, but it's a different part of the medical profession that doesn't like hydroxychloroquine. But I get a little tired of anybody, including our own governor,
yeah,
who thinks it's the government's responsibility to tell us everything that we can do, many things we can't do, and just unilaterally makes decisions, because that's not what this country was built on.
that's right.
And even when you get to the point of justifying anyone or all of these decisions by, well, this is what the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta says ought to be our standard policy, or any other government entity, I became awfully suspicious
As we all did.
of the CDC about 25 years ago when I was in the Arizona Senate. And I don't think I've ever shared this story with you. And I know we've got listeners and viewers, and so I'm going to have to do it a little bit delicately.
No, go ahead.
But when I was, before I became president of the Senate, there was 1 2-year period where the Democrats and the Republicans were evenly divided in the Arizona State Senate. There's 30 total members, and we happen to have 15 Republicans and 15 Democrats. And one of our Republicans went with the Democrats and made a deal with them that if they'd make him president, he would kind of vote with them and treat them as the majority. Well, that didn't sit well with all the rest of us Republicans. But during that time, I was called the Republican floor leader. And one of the days I was Republican floor leader, a bill was introduced by a Republican senator, quite a bit on the liberal side, but anyway, and it said that all sex education courses in Arizona schools should have to comply with guidelines established by the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, on the surface, you'd think, well, certainly the standards or the whatever the CDC had decided was appropriate for sex education courses all over the country would be pretty straightforward. But Kathy Herod from the Center for Arizona Policy, a very conservative lobbying group that looks out after our constitutional rights, and she came to me and she said, something doesn't feel right about this. And we got on the CDC website to see what the standards for sex education courses were as declared by the CDC. And I cannot go into some of the things that they said were appropriate for middle and high school students because it is just almost unthinkable. But they actually had published in the standards for sex education for third graders, they thought it was appropriate at the CDC that part of the third grade sexual education curriculum was that the class would be divided into two teams, and they would line up in lines, and they would have condom races. And each third grade student would be given a dildo or a cucumber, whichever the school could come up with. And then a common condom would start at the beginning of the line, and it would be a race. And each third grade student would put a condom on their cucumber and take it off, and then pass it to the next third grader, who would put the condom on and off their cucumber. And whichever team completed this first was the winner. That was for third graders out of the Center for Disease Control. So me personally, I'm a little bit suspicious whenever I hear that, well, the CDC has declared this is that and that is this. And that bill probably would have gone through had I not stood up on the floor and asked the senator that was proposing this bill to not introduce the bill. And then when she refused to stand down, then I had to start reading from the CDC approved curriculum, including third graders having condom races. And so anytime I hear somebody say, well, we ought to do this because the CDC said so, that doesn't fly very well with me.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, that's really,
Oh, they even had stuff for kindergartners.
yeah. I bet. Yeah, yeah. Well, and thus we've evolved to this comprehensive sex education thing that's now being pushed all around, and you know, it's just sick stuff, Ken. I don't know why the CDC would even be involved with sex education. There's kind of a disconnect to me of why they'd even be involved with it. But I want you to talk a little bit about why you think Governor Ducey won't call a special session. What is his hesitancy with the liability issue just hanging out there, that the House passed a bill and had it all ready to go? And I know that our HOA is shut down because of the liability reason. Now I hear that the schools, their insurance company is not going to insure them against a COVID person. If somebody gets COVID in the school, they're not going to be insured for that, because, and all of this stuff comes from the lawyers that are advising Governor Ducey. I understand that, and the medical people, but why won't he call a special session? Because now we heard from Dave Gowan that the budget is $700 billion in the red now.
I have heard a mixture.
$700 million and going from $1 billion rainy day fund.
Well, my short answer, and this is just pure speculation, because
well, we like speculation.
I am not in contact with the governor
Right.
or his staff. Obviously,
Well, if you were, I know things would probably be going a lot differently.
well, they would be, because I am very disappointed in the way that this whole pandemic has been handled in Arizona. I don't see state government and the governor, him or herself, as the one that's supposed to take care of everybody.
Right.
I think that America was built on people taking individual responsibility,
Exactly.
Exercising their freedoms to try this, fail at that. There's no way the government can assure that we're not going to get sick
That's right.
from anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's called COVID-19 because there were 18 others before it.
Right.
And even the common cold rhinovirus is a form of the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, whether you want to go back to the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918 or 16,
Yeah, 18,
yeah.
I think it was. Yeah.
Well, I don't think the world was created by God with any kind of guarantee that we're not going to get sick. In fact, we're all mortal. We're going to experience death and sickness and
Yeah.
whatever, one way or the other. I can't believe some of the things that have been done. But as to why not calling a special session, I have to believe that maybe he is doing so because he'd rather run the state by the next executive order than have to deal with 90 legislators who are going to have their ideas and input as to how to run the state. But we live in a democratic republic. We don't live in a autocracy where one person gets to make all the decisions. Governor Doug Ducey is not the king of Arizona. And but as long as we allow him to just keep governing by executive order, maybe it's easier for him to govern that way than call the legislature in, get everybody's input, and do some of these things. I think this whole liability issue is one of the most important ones. I hope that the U.S. Congress can get something done between a Republican-controlled Senate and a Nancy Pelosi-controlled House.
That's a big hope.
Oh, that scares me. Yeah. I don't have much confidence in what comes out of the House anymore, but I would love to see the U.S. Congress come up with something that gives businesses reasonable levels of immunity for having acted in good faith. And I mean, I help run a family business.
Right.
Our CEO is a person who is very conservative and has done everything in her power to make sure that we do everything we can at Bennett Oil to keep people from getting COVID. We've been fortunate. Out of our 65 employees, only one has done so, has contracted the virus. We think that happened at a church service that he attended. And it was a testimony type of a meeting, and they were passing around a microphone, and people are slobbering on the microphone, and he got COVID. But 10 days later, it had run its course, and he's back working for us, and everything's fine. So I can only believe that the hesitancy to call a special session comes from it's easier to just run things by executive order than have to deal with 90 other elected representatives of the people. But I don't think that's the way it should be.
And I think you're correct. I really think that's probably spot on as far as why it's being done. And we're like you. It's very disappointing, and the people's voice isn't getting heard through their representatives and senators. We asked those people to go up to Phoenix and speak for us, and I can tell you let me ask you about your Prescott mayor. Has he been pretty reasonable in all this?
He has, and I can tell in some situations, for example, when the governor first kind of did the shutdown, and then it came up to when that was supposed to end, and it was extended.
Yeah.
I think our local mayor, Greg Mingarelli, who I have a lot of faith and confidence in, I could tell that he was very much against that, and he had to kind of bite his tongue. I could tell as he was responding to media questions and things like that was not something he agreed to. There's a real hypocrisy in the way Governor Ducey has told us he was going to lead on this issue.
Yeah,
at the beginning of the pandemic, he kept saying, this is a statewide issue, and we're going to do things, one way, and local officials, whether they be mayors or boards of supervisors or whatever, are not allowed to do something more.
Exactly. I read the EO this morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he let the mayors of Phoenix and Tucson and Flagstaff started crying about it, and then he just changed his whole.
And then all of a sudden he did a 180 and said, well, we're going to let everybody kind of do their own thing. And if some want to go farther than what I think is the right way. And so it's been very hypocritical to say for the first month or two of the whole pandemic that, our freedoms mean something. And if I say that these businesses are essential and these are not, we're not going to let local elected officials do something different or more or less. And then when the pressure got too big, that's exactly what he did. Yeah. He defaulted back and said, well, we are going to let mayors or councils of cities or boards of supervisors of counties decide whether they want to go farther than what I've recommended or not as far. And so now we're just in this free for all, but every so often we get, we're waiting for executive order number 20. How many are there?
I don't
20,
know, there's 45, so
45.
so I
So
think
who
we're
knows
up
what's
to
going to happen in 46?
yeah. I, yeah, it's crazy down here. You can imagine Pima County with our board of supervisors and Chuck Huckleberry. Even Huckleberry's come out now and said, well, we can't open the schools. What the hell he has to do with it, pardon my French, I don't know. The county administrator decides whether the schools are going to open or not, because it's supposed to be up to the school superintendents. But
Well, we have 237 school districts in Arizona, and Arizona has always been based on local control.
right,
And I learned, having started my political and public service career at a city council level up here in Prescott,
exactly.
that the best government usually is the one that's closest to the people and makes decisions that are meaningful in that community or city or whatever. And so, and I can remember when I got elected to the Prescott City Council, the executive director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns came up and did a training for us, because I was 25 years old when I got elected to the Prescott City Council.
Yeah,
And there were several new councilmen that got elected that year. And so we had the League of Cities and Towns come up, and the director was a guy named Jack Dabalski, dearly loved throughout the city, throughout the state. He's since passed away, but he shared with us the Dabalski theory of government, which is that every level of government will always complain about supposedly higher levels of government being oppressive and giving them unfunded mandates and telling them what to do. And yet they will usually turn around and do the same thing to lower levels of government below them. And that's exactly what has happened under Governor Ducey, is that, you know, he's made it clear that he doesn't like the federal government telling Arizona how to do things, but then he's going to decide what every one of the 237 school districts get to do, and the 1,500 charters or 500 charter schools,
right.
and 15 counties. And I believe we need to get our children back in schools as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I was just talking to one of our employees in our family business today, and she was talking about the tremendous burden it has put on her as a single parent with two children, one in middle school and one in high school, where 2 weeks before the schools are allowed to open in person, if that ever happens, they're going to allow the kids to start doing online stuff, but that means she has to take a day away from work to be there to make sure that those two kids get signed up for all the classes and do their all online stuff. And she talks about how during the end of the last school year, she feels that her two kids probably lost a month or two of education just because everybody went on spring break and nobody really ever came back from it.
Right.
And yes, we were told that, oh, we're doing stuff online, but I don't think the level and quality of learning occurs in this online approach as it does in a classroom with a teacher that you can go up on a break and ask them, I didn't understand this about math. She found herself coming home from work exhausted and then having to work with kids on math homework until all hours of the night, and still cook dinner and do all the things that you got to do. And
she was lucky that she could just leave them at home, right?
Well, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
if they were any younger,
yeah,
she'd have, she had to come up with daycare and all kinds of things. So I think we need to get we just heard from our kids who live up in Utah that their schools are going to open in person on time in August. And I couldn't be happier for my own grandkids that that's what they're doing.
Great. That's good. Yeah, I push in, you probably know Manny Valenzuela down here, the school district in Sahuarita, and I'm sending him love notes every other day about opening the schools and
if I'm not mistaken, we have not had one death in the country under 26 years of age, have we?
Well, I heard the other day that there was a 19-year-old that died in Florida.
Well,
but nobody under 18 years old has died.
I think it's indisputable that for whatever reason, this is a virus that is most critical and dangerous for the older population and those that have underlying medical conditions.
Yeah, Governor Cuomo proved that.
Exactly. And we shouldn't be shutting schools down as though they were senior care facilities,
Right.
which is where the focus should have been in the first place.
Of course.
We shouldn't have shut down the whole economy. We should have looked at the areas of high risk where they knew from almost the very beginning where the areas of high risk were. And we should have focused on those areas and let the general economy continue to charge along.
Well, and I hate to say use the word typically, but as many of our leaders do, Ken, you know that they accept the premises of the Democrats and immediately react to that instead of saying, I don't accept your premise and we're not going to do that, but for some reason they always, they accept their premise and whatever it is, like you're racist, right? They accept that and then try to come up with all the solutions.
All they got to do is call you racist.
But we're not racist.
All they got to do is call you racist, call you unreasonable, call you unempathetic, and then all of a sudden we start acting in ways that we feel like we must have to disprove a negative somehow.
It's a black hole.
We need to stay with the principles that our founding fathers put in place.
That's right.
Which is individual responsibility, freedom, and there was no guarantee that government was going to be able to make all the right decisions for everybody.
Of course not. A governor, I would never hold a governor responsible for my life, ever. And there's no way that he can control what's going to happen to each individual.
I happen to be aware of dozens, and I'm not exaggerating, dozens of instances where things Doug Ducey has said were not accurate.
Yeah.
As recently as in the State of the State address this past January, before the COVID thing had even hit, stood on the floor of the Arizona State House and said that the debt of the state of Arizona was way down. Yeah. Well, being a former legislator, president of the Senate, and somebody who worked on the budgets of this state for years and years, didn't take me but a few minutes to go to what are called the comprehensive financial reports.
Right, and our first interview, we talked about all that.
And the debts of the state of Arizona are not way down. They are almost $1.5 billion higher today than when this governor took office.
Yeah, and with the pandemic, it's probably higher than that.
Well,
because he just throws money left and right to thinking he can fix things.
And unfortunately, that's happening at the federal level.
Oh yeah, it sure is. We are totally against another $1 trillion, giveaway. And my son's in his 40s and he's a construction worker. He says, Dad, why I go to work every day and pay my taxes, but why should I pay taxes when they're just going to go throw the money away? I mean, he's got a good point.
Well, the first stimulus package, or whatever you want to call it, made not working unemployment benefits so high that there's huge portions of the economy where people get more money for not working than they would have had they been working.
Yeah, we've heard of people that have refused to go back to work because they're getting more money under unemployment, right? Which they all were warned about. There was a that was a mandate it was a funded mandate, but there were consequences by doing.
Well, it was a funded mandate as far as the federal government sending checks to the states or whatever to do that. Yes. But it's an unfunded mandate in the sense that the federal government didn't have $3 or $4 trillion. We have borrowed that. We have borrowed that money.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll borrow another $1 trillion if they do another $1 trillion package. And so, I can remember Barack Obama standing on the floor of the U.S. Senate, blistering George W. Bush that during his administration, the national debt had gone from $5 to $10 trillion.
Yeah.
And then during his 8 years, it went from 10 to 20.
Yeah.
And now we're just perpetuating the same.
Yeah, so now we're at 25. So
yeah.
Well, I think we've covered it. We'd like to fix it, wouldn't we, kid?
We would.
Yeah.
But it takes, and maybe it's a good time to remind your viewers and listeners that there's an election in many parts of on August 4th is the primary election.
Exactly.
In many parts of our state, for a variety of different reasons, you've got enclaves of heavy Republicans in some areas where who wins the Republican primary will really dictate who wins the general in November. The same is for Democrats across the state. There's many legislative districts and city councils and school boards where the decision will be made in the primary. School boards usually don't have primaries, but they have a primary to narrow it down to 2 for every one office in the general. So make sure people get out there and vote. Even though it's not the general election, the president's office won't be on this August ballot, but there's lots of other important offices that are.
Yeah, and it's less than 100 days away from that day.
Yeah, amazing.
So well, thank you so much for coming on, Ken. It's
My
really
pleasure.
It's always great to see you. We consider you one of our great friends, and Patty says hi. And don't forget about September 26th.
September 26th. I'm going to make it if I can.
Yeah, 5 o'clock,
and I'll have the car tuned up and ready.
Yeah, you have our contact information. So
you betcha.
Stay in touch, and thank you again, sir.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
So thank you so much, Ken Bennett. Wasn't that a great interview? You can tell Ken's frustrated too by what Governor Ducey has done, and I wish there was something more we can do. But I just urge you all to contact the governor and write him through his contact information on his website. His Southern Arizona contact is Juan Ciscomani, CISCOMANTI. Juan's a good guy, but we need to write both of them and contact him and tell him we don't like what's going on. We want this economy opened up. We want the schools open. Parents that have to take care of their kids, the younger kids, they need to let these kids go to school and learn, and school districts need to do the best they can to entertain their students, educate them like they should be educated, and I don't know what else there is to say in this. And the hydroxychloroquine thing is so frustrating to us. We were talking about this many weeks ago, how it was working in other countries, and how the Italian doctors figured out that they needed to start treating people before they went to the hospital, because once they got to the hospital, it was not going well, and now we've had this recent thing. So we're hopefully going to be able to present some of this to the local Republican club at one of their meetings coming up, and we're going to talk about these and show the doctors meeting and the things that these doctors are saying. These are medical doctors from around the country that have come together to try to urge the use of hydroxychloroquine and allow your primary care physician to give you that if you request it, if he wants to give it to you, and stop this nonsense. So anyway, thank you, Ken Bennett. It was great to see you. Tomorrow night we're going to have on Paul Fitch, who's kind of a local survival professional teacher, and we're going to talk about things you can do during the pandemic, and where we're at now, what government's doing, and what you can do to protect yourselves. And of course, we have all this violence going on around the country where people are being attacked by some of these radical groups like Antifa and the BLM people. These are not civil protesters. These are violent groups that are doing a lot of damage around the country, and we hope we hope we get that under control. The Fed's do, and I know President Trump is doing what he can to do that. So anyway, tomorrow night, Paul Fitch, he'll be on about 5 o'clock. I'm going to play a little video before then, so we're going to come on about 4:45 to do that video. And anyway, one more time, thank you, Ken Bennett. God bless all of you folks. Thanks for watching tonight. And we will see you tomorrow night on the Sahuarita Tea Party YouTube channel. Good night.